Welcome, dear listeners. I'm delighted to greet you on my channel. I present to you a new and engaging story. Enjoy listening. Natalia glanced in the rearview mirror, adjusted a few stray strands of hair, and sighed. Her day at the accounting firm had been chaotic. The quarterly report, a tax audit, the director's outburst, and at home, her own problems awaited. Inna Gennadyevna, her mother-in-law, who 2 weeks prior had decided to visit her beloved son for a week, had stayed indefinitely. In recent days, the tension in the household had reached its peak. Inna Gennadyevna had discovered a multitude of flaws in her daughter-in-law's housekeeping and did not hesitate to comment on Natalia's every action. Yesterday, after a remark about incorrectly prepared borscht, Natalia couldn't take it anymore and asked her mother-in-law to return home. Her husband, Sergei, remained silent at first. Later, however, in private, he had a fierce argument with his wife. "How can you speak to my mother like that? She devoted her entire life to me," he yelled. Natalia tried to explain that she loved his mother, but they needed their own space. Natalia stopped in front of their building and turned off the engine. Her gaze fell on a bouquet of chamomile flowers she had bought on the way. "We'll make up," she thought, feeling exhausted from the constant conflicts. As she ascended to the 5th floor, she planned her evening. A calm conversation with her husband and mother-in-law, without arguments or reproaches. Perhaps she could even negotiate specific departure dates for Inna Gennadyevna. But on the landing outside their apartment, Natalia froze in disbelief. Her suitcases and several bags of belongings stood by the door. Her heart pounded faster. She took out her keys, but the lock wouldn't budge. It had clearly been changed. Natalia pressed the doorbell. Silence. She pressed again. Longer. "Who is it?" Her husband's voice called out. "Seryozha, it's me. It's me." "Please open." Natalia tried to speak calmly. A whisper, then footsteps sounded from behind the door. "Mom doesn't want to live with you. Go to your parents." Her husband roared through the door, so loudly that presumably the neighbors on the lower floors could hear. Natalia was stunned. What was happening? This was their apartment, purchased with a mortgage, to which she contributed half her salary. And Inna Gennadyevna was merely a guest. How could her husband do this? Her first impulse was to pound on the door, to scream, to demand to be let in. But Natalia suppressed the emotion. "Calm down," she told herself. Hysterics wouldn't help. Instead, she silently walked to the electrical panel on the landing, opened it, and resolutely unscrewed the fuses, cutting off the power to the apartment. In the complete darkness of the hallway, illuminated only by the dim light from the window, she leaned against the wall and waited. She knew they wouldn't last long in the apartment without a flashlight or candles. Sergei had a terrible fear of the dark since childhood, and their phones were undoubtedly dead. He never monitored his battery levels. After 5 minutes, a key scraped in the lock. The door creaked open, and a bewildered Sergei appeared in the opening, holding a lighter. "What kind of joke is this? Turn on the light," he hissed. Natalia stared at him silently, then at Inna Gennadyevna's worried face, which appeared from behind his shoulder. Their lives had not prepared any of them for what was to come. Not for the fact that she would spend the next hour methodically packing her mother-in-law's belongings into her suitcase, nor for ordering a taxi to the train station, nor for calmly explaining to her husband that either his mother was leaving now or he was leaving with her. "You can't do this," Inna Gennadyevna exclaimed. "Seryozha, surely you won't let her treat your mother like this." But Sergei, to her surprise, remained silent, looking from his wife to his mother. For the first time in their marriage, Natalia saw an uncharacteristic tenderness, bewilderment, and fear in his eyes. He had never seen her like this, calm, resolute, and unyielding. "Inna Gennadyevna," Natalia said, zipping up her mother-in-law's suitcase. "I respect you as my husband's mother, but this apartment is Sergei's and my home, which we are building together. You will always be a welcome guest, but only for a prearranged duration." Inna Gennadyevna coughed, her face flushing with indignation. "Seryozha, do you hear what she's saying?" Sergei, however, did not rush to defend his mother. He looked at Natalia with new eyes, as if seeing her for the first time. Her composure and confidence disarmed him, stripping away the familiar ground for manipulation. "Mom," he finally said, "Natasha is right. She and I need to live our own lives. I'll take you to the station." Inna Gennadyevna gasped, clutching her chest. "So, that's it. I gave you my whole life, and you're throwing me out like an old rag. Natalia expected her husband's usual capitulation, but he only sighed. No one is throwing you out. You can visit, but right now, we need to be alone. Half an hour later, Natalia stood by the window, watching her husband put his mother into a taxi. She saw Inna Genadievna speaking animatedly, gesturing with her hands, while Sergei nodded wearily. Finally, the taxi drove off. When her husband returned, they sat in the kitchen for a long time, talking. For the first time in many months, they were truly talking, not exchanging accusations. I don't understand what came over me, Sergei admitted, looking into his cup. When Mom arrived and started pointing out what was wrong in the house, I felt like I was 15 again, unable to contradict her. And then you decided to put me on the stairs? Natalia asked, surprised by her own calmness. I didn't decide. It just sort of happened. She was crying, saying you hated her, that she had nowhere to go. I was confused. He looked up at her. Forgive me. I will never. Natalia raised a hand, stopping him. It's not about forgiveness, Sergei. It's about us being a family, you and me. Your mother is part of your life, and I respect that. But our home is our territory. That evening marked a turning point in their relationship. Sergei had to relearn how to be not his mother's son, but his wife's husband. It was a long, sometimes painful process, but each step made their relationship stronger. 2 years later, their lives had changed beyond recognition. Her relationship with Inna Genadievna hadn't become perfect, but clear boundaries were established. She visited on weekends every 2 months, giving advance notice, and no longer attempted to command their household. Natalia changed jobs to a more promising one with a flexible schedule. Sergei, inspired by her decisiveness, finally decided to start his own business, a small electronics repair company he had dreamed of for many years. But the most significant change was the birth of their daughter, Polina. The pregnancy was unexpected but welcomed. When Natalia shared the news, Sergei wept with joy, and the next day began renovating the future nursery. Inna Genadievna arrived a week after their granddaughter's birth. Natalia feared a return of old problems but saw a completely different mother-in-law, touched, willing to help, but not intrusive. You know, Inna Genadievna said, holding the sleeping Polina in her arms, I never thought I would be grateful to you for that incident. Natalia raised an eyebrow questioningly. When you turned off the lights and made me leave, her mother-in-law explained, I was so offended then. I didn't speak to Sergei for a whole month. And then I realized I had become the woman I always despised, my own mother-in-law. My mother-in-law ruined my first marriage, constantly interfering, dictating, criticizing, and I vowed to myself that I would never be like that, and I didn't notice myself getting even worse. Natalia didn't know what to say. She had never seen Inna Genadievna so open and vulnerable. Thank you for not turning away from Sergei after he treated you like that, her mother-in-law continued. And thank you for finding the strength to forgive me. Not everyone could. I love your son, Natalia replied simply. And you are a part of his life. We are a family, with all our complexities. That evening, after Inna Genadievna went to rest in the guest room, Sergei hugged Natalia and quietly said, Every day I thank fate that you didn't leave then, that you had the strength to fight for us. And I am grateful that you had the wisdom to understand, she smiled. 3 more years passed. Polina grew into a curious and energetic girl, and their family was blessed with a son, Kirill. Sergei's business flourished. Natalia worked remotely, balancing her career and family. Inna Genadievna became an indispensable helper. She visited when asked, helped with the children, but never overstepped established boundaries. They learned to appreciate each other and find compromises. One evening, while tucking the children into bed, Natalia heard Polina ask her grandmother, Grandma, why do you and Mom get along so well? Vika from kindergarten says her mom and her mother-in-law always fight. Inna Genadievna smiled and stroked her granddaughter's head. Because your mother once taught me a very important lesson. She showed me that love is not only tender feelings, but also respect for others' boundaries. Later, after the children fell asleep, the 3 of them sat in the kitchen, drinking tea and reminiscing, now with smiles, without resentment or bitterness. Do you remember how you cut the power at the electrical panel? Sergei chuckled. I almost died of fear. I was always afraid of the dark, and then there was the realization that I had done something irreparable. And I thought you were going to strangle me, Natalia confessed. I hated you at that moment, Inna Genadievna said unexpectedly, and now I realize it was the best moment in our relationship. All three laughed, understanding the long journey they had traveled from that night with the lights out to their current peaceful family happiness. Later, after her mother-in-law went to sleep and Sergei checked on the children, Natalia stood by the window, gazing at the night city. She remembered herself 5 years ago, frightened, bewildered, standing with a bouquet of chamomile flowers before the locked door of her own apartment. Who would have thought that that moment of despair would become the beginning of true strength and genuine happiness? Sergei hugged her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. What are you thinking about? About how sometimes you need to plunge into darkness to finally see the light, she replied, turning to her husband. Their lives had truly not prepared them for such happiness, but they had built it themselves, step by step, day by day, transforming conflicts into lessons, mistakes into a foundation for something better and real.